Hi everyone, and welcome to Dennis Deep Cuts, the 20th installment of this YouTube series. 20 episodes, who would have thought? Today we're going to talk about going out with a bang. Let's see what happens. One of the most difficult things about being an artist is to sort of ensure the legacy that you will leave behind. Today we're going to talk about a couple of artists that ensure that by putting out a fantastic final album. In some of these cases, it will be artists that has a long career and they top it off with a really fine record. And in some of these cases, it's bands or artists that should have done more, but they broke up and their final record is just like a taste of the magnificent music that could have come. So let's dive in 10 records, the final records, and see what happens. The Lords of the New Church were formed in 1982 by Steve Bators from the Dead Boys and Brian James from the Damned, together with Dave Trigona from Sham 69 and Nick Turner from the Barracudas. They were one of punk's earliest supergroups. They mixed their punk rock roots with some gothic elements and some glam rock kind of music. Their third album, The Method to Our Madness, from 1984, became their final record, even though they officially didn't break up until 1989. After this record, they got dropped by the label, but then they soldiered on for a couple of years trying to make it, and they officially broke up in 1989 when they were going to go on a tour, and Steve Bators didn't want to do the tour, so the rest of the band actually put in an ad in a music paper looking for a replacement singer from the tour. That didn't come to fruition, and the band figured like, well, if Steve didn't see it, it's fine, we'll just play more shows with him. And then the next show they played, Steve actually showed up with the t-shirt of that ad on, and that kind of signaled the end of the band. Then a year later, in 1990, Steve Bators died. He got hit by a car in Paris, where he was living at the time. I think that this record is great. It's just the right mix of like punk rock and gothic hard rock with some fantastic pop hooks. Steve's singing is great, and the band they sound inspired, and I have a hard time understanding why the record label would drop them after this pretty fucking great record. But here we are, going out with a bang, the Lords of the New Church. Let's talk about the Walker Brothers. The Walker Brothers was started in 1964 in Los Angeles before they relocated to London, where they quickly became one of the biggest vocal groups in the world, with fantastic arrangements and impeccable vocal performances. They made it big with songs like The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore and My Ship Is Coming In. They broke up in 1968, but in 1975 they got back together to record a couple of more records, and in 1978 they released their final outing, Night Flights. Night Flights is a spectacular record, especially the first 4 songs written by Scott Walker. It's unlike anything I ever heard, basically. It's dark, and it's weird, and it's fascinating, it's engaging, and it's experimental, and it definitely sets the tone of what Scott Walker would go on to do after this. The rest of the record is fine, but it's hard to sort of compete with those 4 tracks, basically. It's in effect like almost like 3 short solo records compiled to one record, with Scott Walker as being by far the best one. It's a bold and very strange record, and it very much signaled the end of the band. But yeah, Night Flights, you should check it out, especially the first 4 songs. Leonard Cohen was a Canadian author, poet, and musician They put out some of the most amazing music throughout his career. Everything from his early folky stuff in the 60s to his strange 80s synth-driven records like I'm Your Man. Leonard Cohen has always had a very singular voice. And I'm there to say that pretty much anything he ever put out is worth checking out. Today we're talking about final albums, and what better way to leave this world with a record called You Want It Darker. It's released only 70 days before his death in 2016. And this is a very spectacular album that deals with death and mortality and legacy and faith. As you can tell by the title, it's a very, very dark record, but not at all hopeless, though. There's some sort of light, and there's some sort of there is some sort of hope in the record. Cohen's voice sounds like a man that's seen it all, done it all, been through it all, but it still has a swagger and a tone that's just incredible. His lyrics has always been on point. That's been his truly, the strong feat of Leonard Cohen throughout the ages. And it is truly fascinating to see someone contemplate life and his pretty imminent death in such a naked way. It's a fantastic album from start to finish. I know that there was another record that came out after his death, but I think this is probably the real final record, because you can sort of hear that it is, and he's putting everything into it. And this record is just phenomenally dark and fascinating. One of the best bands in the world is, of course, The Birthday Party. They formed in 1977 in Australia under the name Boys Next Door. They released one record under that name before they moved to London and rebranded themselves The Birthday Party. This album here, Junkyard, is their third one, the last one. It's released in 1982. Little bit of cheating here, because after this record they put out two fantastic 12 inches, the Bad Seeds EP and their final outing, Mutiny. But we are talking about final albums, so let's talk about final albums. Junkyard is just wonderful. It's chaotic, it's wild in all the right ways. It's filled with fucked up blues, angular post-punk, and noise. I think Cave's singing is menacing and just hauntingly wild, and the band is in fine form. It would have been fantastic to hear them put out another record, because I think the 12 inches that came out after this one, that's when they really kind of find their true identity. But things like inner dealings, drugs, and boredom officially put an end to the band in the summer of 1983. The Birthday Party's entire catalog is mandatory listening for everyone that likes fucked up music, and the legacy they left behind is pretty spectacular. If you look at everything that came out of the Birthday Party once they broke up. And even though they recorded some awesome music after this one, it is still a pretty awesome final record to leave behind. The Birthday Party. One of the best metal bands of all times, probably one of the best bands of all times, and one of the most consistent purveyors of aggressive music is, of course, Slayer. They put out their final album, Repentless, in 2015. Slayer started in 1981 and quickly became one of the metal world's biggest band through groundbreaking records such as Rain in Blood and South of Heaven. I mean, I was a little metal kid that was just into hard rock and heavy metal, and buying Rain in Blood when it came out definitely changed the trajectory of my life and how I viewed heavy music, They were banned for almost 40 years, and throughout their career they have been incredibly consistent. Even the worst Slayer records are still pretty great. And their final album, Repentless, is no exception. I actually think it's one of their better later day Slayer records. And yes, Dave Lombardo is out of the mix again, and it is their first and only record that does not feature anything from Jeff Hanneman. Gary Holt from Exodus is a fine replacement, but I don't think he contributed to any songwriting on this record, but he is a great guitar player, and live he was a really solid replacement. It's also one of the most successful Slayer records in the last 20 years of their career. It ended up on a whole slew of top lists across the world. It just sounds like a great Slayer record. There are no surprises. There are no trying to recreate the wheel or anything. It's just like Slayer. Fast, aggressive, relentless, just pretty fucking kick-ass record. The reason for them breaking up is a bit murky, and there was even rumors that there was a new Slayer record in the works when they did break up, that we might never hear. Probably never hear. Anyway, it's a pretty good way to cap off their career. Repentless with Slayer. It's a pretty good record. On the last episode where I talked about 7 inches in the letter B, I talked a little bit about Bikini Kill. And today we're going to talk a little bit more, and we're going to talk about their final record, Reject All American, from 1996. I love this record when it came out. I still love it. I think it's great. It's everything that made Bikini Kill such a fantastic band. Angry lyrics. They're both smart and funny. And the music is just relentless and propulsive, and it's fantastic. They only released one split LP and one full-length album and a couple of 7 inches before their final record. And they broke up in 1997. But the legacy of Bikini Kill is, of course, huge and massive. And for me, as I talked about last episode, they were so important in shaping my politics and shaping my view of the world with feminism and gender issues and so on and so forth. And I am thrilled that they are back together again, playing shows. I'm not going to hold my breath for the comeback record, but in this day and age, I would not mind a new Bikini Kill record. I think we could use it. Everybody could use it. So, but until then, check out the last Bikini Kill record that they put out, Reject All American. It's a really, really, really nice record. Very few bands are calling it quits at the height of their career, you know. When the train's fucking rolling, let's go with it. For most of us, it's a slow fade into obscurity, and the law of diminishing returns until you are forgotten by all. But one of the bands that truly broke up when they were the biggest they ever been is, of course, The Jam. The Jam started in 1972 already, but it wasn't until punk rock when they finally, when they became a band of their own, so to speak. They weren't really punk, they were more of a modern revival thing, but they got attached to that whole 76, 77 punk rock thing. They released their first album, In the City, in 1977, and they released their sixth and final album, The Gift, in 1982. That is 6 records in 5 years. It's pretty impressive. It went straight to #1 in the UK, and at this point the Jam had officially had 18 top 40 consecutive singles on the charts, and it also spent 16 weeks on the top Billboard Top 100 in the US. So the world was there for the taking. But in the fall of 1982, Paul Weller pulled the plug on the band, and by the end of 1982, they were done, basically. Paul Weller, of course, went on to form the highly underrated Style Council before he became one of the most popular solo artists of the UK. I think that The Gift is not necessarily their best record, but I think it's a bold and adventurous record. I would say gone are the punk roots of yesterday, and It's a record filled with like pop art and a lot of soul music, complete horn section. Of course, Happy Together, Town Called Malice, I think is the track. Yeah, of course. Those were massive hits, but the rest of the record is quite adventurous and quite like, there's a lot of weird stuff happening on it. And it is a pretty fantastic final record. The jam was massive for me when I was young, or still, I guess. When I just got into punk, my uncle called me and he said, "Oh, you're a punk now. I'll give you some punk records." And he gave me the Ramones' Road to Ruin and the first two jam records. So the jam's been with me since day one, basically. And I always had a bit of a, fascinating with the Rickenbacker guitar and the mod suits. And their entire discography is great. The Gift is no exception. It's a fantastic record. And the jam was also a bit of a big influence on the International Noise Conspiracy. Yeah. And then there's some bands that just burn bright and they fade away before people can really have a chance to discover them. One of those bands is the Swedish band In Solitude. They started in 2002 in Uppsala, and they released two pretty great records before their final record, Sister, in 2013. Well, their first couple of records is more like satanic heavy metal. The third record is, it's even darker and moodier and dives into some gothic elements with long atmospheric songs, but also some excellent metal riffage. I think this album is like one of those 10 out of 10 metal records, and I was super bummed when they called it quits in 2015 because I didn't get to see them play live on this record. All three records are worth checking out, but I think this last one is just, it's a classic metal record already. You can check out some of the members. The singer have a new band called Pogo, and some of them also play in a pretty cool band called Reveal. And Henrik, that played guitar on this record, you can find him playing guitar with Viagra Boys nowadays, and he also put out a couple of excellent solo records under the name of Henrik Palm. So there's a lot of music for you to check out there. But yeah, In Solitude, they could have been proper contenders, I think. And then we also have artists that never get any type of recognition in their lifetime. Nick Drake was one of those artists that just, I think he was ahead of the curve, basically. He released some of the greatest music ever released and didn't get any recognition. Poor record sales, battling with a crippling depression, not wanting to play live, not wanting to do interviews. Nick Drake kind of semi-retired from playing music and moved home to his parents after the release of his third record, Pink Moon, in 1972. He died of an overdose of prescribed antidepressants 2 years later at the age of 26. His final album is beautiful, and it's just Nick Drake. No overdubs, no strings. The record he recorded before that, there are some strings and horns, and it's like kind of lush arrangements, and he didn't like that. So he went into the studio 2 nights and recorded this really sparse and fantastic record. He used his guitar and his voice. I think there's like a touch of piano overdubs on one of the songs, but that's it. Isla Record didn't even want a third record from him. They thought the first 2 records didn't really do well, so they were like, "We're done with you." But then he showed up and he's like, "Here's another record," and they put it out. And I was baffled to read that in his lifetime, the 3 records that he put out sold less than 4,000 records combined, which is just so unfair. He got a huge resurgence in the late 70s, early 80s when tons of artists started talking about his influence, and his record actually got repressed, and Now he's one of those artists that record collectors and music lovers keep discovering every day because his music is just that amazing. Yeah, all his recorded output is great, and his final record, Pink Moon, is just beautiful, beautiful, and fantastic record. And of course, we are ending today's show with David Bowie. Of course. With The Next Day, he already made one of the most unexpected comebacks of all time. And with the record Black Star, he made his death into an artistic statement. This record was recorded in secret and it was released on his 69th birthday, just 2 days before he died. I love this record so much. What a parting gift. It's experimental, strange, dark, sometimes uplifting and beautiful. And I think Bowie ended his career the way his career has always been, with trying new things, breaking boundaries by creating art that challenges and at the same time pulls you in. I mean, I can only imagine being this bold and daring when you were recording your 26th album. It's quite the inspiration. As I've stated numerous times before, I love Bowie. I love his entire catalog. One of these days I might do a deep dive into his entire catalog. And this record is no exception. I mean, this record has a weird art rock propulsion to it, and it just moves in all these different layers. And it's very, very, very far from a conventional rock album. But what a way to go. David Bowie, Black Star. I mean, this is the legacy you want to leave behind. Just like, I'm gonna die, here's a record about that. Just amazing. And there you have it, 10 records with artists that went out with a bang. What artists have I forgotten? What's your favorite artist that went out with a bang? It was quite interesting because usually I talk a lot about punk and hardcore, but every punk and hardcore band, they either put out one record or then they're still putting out records. There's very little in between in that, but I might do a deep dive into that next time and see what are some great punk bands that left us with that final record, that final statement. Yeah, it's great. Until next time, my friends, stay wild, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.